Hello everybody, and welcome to the Sovereign Village Project. When I originally started this channel a few months ago, it was with some vague notion of forming community, believing that in order to survive and thrive during the coming economic collapse and the collapse of our environmental resources and natural resources, and really our society as a whole, as well as the resulting totalitarianism which we see arising in our world, in order to survive and thrive throughout this, the only path forward I can see is to form resilient, self-sufficient, sustainable, and independent communities. And I originally thought that the way to do that was going to be to buy a big piece of land, subdivide it up, design it according to permaculture principles, and just start this community from scratch, from the ground up. And while that sounds like a lot of fun, and I might do some project like that someday, I don't think anymore that that's the solution or the way to go about that. And that's for a lot of reasons. The first and most obvious is capital. Most people just cannot access the capital they need to undertake such a project, and it's really hard to get people who don't know or truly trust each other to combine capital to do that kind of thing. And it needs to be a large piece of property. If you're really going to build a self-sufficient community, truly a self-sufficient community, you need a lot of land, and that's going to take a lot of capital. And while I feel confident that I could build up to that eventually, time is of the essence. We need to be doing this right now. And that's a huge blockage. That's a reason that people aren't able to start these communities. And there's a number of other problems with that idea as well. One of which is that if you're becoming truly self-sufficient and no longer tolerating totalitarianism, you know what's going to happen. We've all seen what happened in Waco. We know what happens. The government does not like it when you reduce your dependence on them, and neither do the cronies that own the government. They will destroy you. And when you're in a small geographical location like that, you're easily destroyed. And lastly, why are we gonna give all this up? Why are we going to give up our world to the tyrants? Are we really just going to huddle into these tiny little properties and give this all to them? That's not right. That's not the right thing to do. And it's not going to work. And so in our pursuit of community and finding out how we're going to build a community, we moved out here and we bought a 5-acre site that we've been building on. We've been testing out how to build energy systems and permaculture foodscapes, and we've been working on building our capital and learn how to subdivide and all the ins and outs of that. But in doing so, we found that we're accidentally building the community around us. It's literally forming around us. And it does need to be in a geographical location. Community does have to be centered in a small geographical area for a lot of reasons. For one, we don't know what's going to happen in terms of fossil fuels. It's clear that those with tyrannical ideologies do not like us to have free transportation, free access to transportation, and they have a lot of control over oil prices and over what's going to happen in terms of our access to fuel and our access to roads. We don't know what's going to happen as far as passports and ships and our ability to travel freely. So we need to be close for that reason and for just practical reasons. When it comes to communities that are rooted in agorism, of course you need to be close. You have to be able to exchange services, help each other out, keep your money within the community, keep your capital within the community. You need the elderly neighbor down the road to be able to babysit your kids while you're out working. You need to be able to defend each other and have quick systems of defense and response to crime and tyranny and things like that. So it seemed like a tough problem to solve, except that it's just been solving itself around us. As we've become more involved in our community and we've started putting stuff out, we've found it developing. I made that last video on this channel about how our neighbors and I, not in an intentional community, just in a rural subdivision, we came together to address a really bad problem where we had a neighbor with a drug problem there was violence involved, there was children in a bad situation, and normally that problem would be solved with violence. It would be policemen with guns coming in to throw that guy in a cage, and it wouldn't solve anything. It would just destroy him. It would hurt everybody involved, and the police had already failed us in that instance anyway. So instead we got together and we solved the problem, truly solved it with dialogue, with respectful conversation, with unity. And we came together, we talked to this guy, and with love and forgiveness, we solved the problem, and everybody was better off at the end. Much, much better off. That's a real community right there. A geographically centered community formed by accident. And it's been happening more and more. We've been finding our tribe out here of like-minded people, but also we've been kind of recruiting through this channel and other means. We've been just finding people who are willing to totally jump in and move out here. And I've been doing what I can to help people find properties. If they're remote, I've been looking at properties for them, analyzing the property. I've been helping them figure out, like, are there building codes in this area? What's the local government like? What are you going to deal with? And so while we're not all next door neighbors, we're forming this community out here, and it's really working. It's really working. It's really practical. And the one thing that really prevents it from being a literal community is a central gathering space, because as much as I believe in private property, we do have a need for common areas. We need we need roads, and we need gathering spaces where we come together as a community. And here I was trying to build that, and I think that was really pretty foolish of me because it already all exists. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Look at this property. This is an old schoolhouse that is now just an unused community center. Look at this building and this land. Look at that field out there, and imagine that field. Instead of being an empty, unused field, what if that was a food forest and there was a greenhouse built against one of the sides of these buildings? Imagine for a moment a place where there was abundant food that not only could be given to the community in terms of like, here's some food because you need it, but what if people came through and they could get cuttings and seedlings, and there could be a class showing them how to go plant those? What if we spread abundant food resources into every single yard in the community, everybody that was willing to take part? What if we did a lot more with these centers? What if we started this school back up? What if we started an educational co-op far removed from the Marxist indoctrination centers that we're currently sending our children to? What if this organization owned a tractor that they lent out to area farmers who couldn't afford that equipment themselves but still need it, or a sawmill? What if this hosted classes teaching you how to build a website, or how to start a business, how to manage your finances properly? What if we turn this into all kinds of educational resources to teach people practical skills, permaculture courses, how to fix a tractor, how to fix a car? What if we use this as a center to disseminate information and resources as far as the new rising world of decentralized manufacturing? That's a really exciting thing I'll do another video about, but there's a lot of folks out there working towards solutions and decentralization. And these buildings here are sitting empty. And it's not just here, there's buildings all over the place like this that could become the hubs, that could become the centers of our new communities, that would create literal communities around us. There's not just these community halls, there's not just schools. Churches are a huge one. We went to a church for the first time in a while here on Easter, and it was the story of so many rural churches throughout America and the world where they're dying a slow death. And these churches have usually a few families and a few elderly, mostly elderly folks, and they're just watching their church die, and they're trying to maintain those facilities, trying to keep the building and the lights on. And they're desperate for some new blood. Now, I think a lot of this is their own fault. The churches have really failed themselves. They've often failed their communities and failed God. They haven't done what they're supposed to do, which is to be a community center and a place to feed the homeless and the hungry and house people and solve the problems. That's what churches are supposed to become. Here's another one. Look at this big field that this church owns. A person could get in that church and make really big change happen. They're desperate for young blood. They need new life. And you may have to suspend a few opinions on how things are done for a while, but if you do believe in basically the concepts of the Christian church, why not join and get involved and get on the board? Because suddenly now you can very easily build trust and show that you are a trustworthy person, and then start affecting change. You could plant that food forest there. You could host those classes there. You could disseminate food and resources and education from that center. You could run that place. You could become the president. You could become, most of those are run by nonprofits, and you could truly control what is happening there. And while it would take a long time to build the necessary capital to purchase a building and a property of that size, but it would take very little time to become involved and to control what happens on that property. So we could do this. We could build these communities. It's very doable. We could get access to places like that, or old commercial buildings. These rural areas are full of old abandoned commercial buildings because the government has for a long time been pushing this industrialization and building the interstate highways and just driving all of the wealth out of these areas, all the wealth, all of the brain, the young people, the energy, and all of the life into this industrial system, into the beast system. We can pull them back out. We can change this. There is a change in consciousness happening. It's people like us realizing that there are very few solutions available to us, and that truly our own altruism is the only thing that's going to save people, and it's the only thing that's going to save our environment from total destruction. So how do we do this other than getting involved? I mean, that's an easy solution, but how is that any different than what exists? And I would say the answer is that two things. As you form nonprofits, and we're going to put out the resources on this channel of how to do that. As you form nonprofits and other organizations to start doing the things, that these be bound by a charter. A simple charter, which is very common in nonprofit organizations, that really sets forth two different things, two very simple things. Got to squeeze by a car here. One of which is, in order to be a member of the organization, you must disavow and actively oppose the use of violence to take people's labor, time, money, capital, resources, land, anything like that. That's all. You just have to actively oppose violently taking people's things and labor, because that's slavery. That's a simple concept we should all be able to agree on. Very simple. That, and that the dissemination of resources and the control of those resources, of those common areas, is to be controlled by and disseminated to those with the closest geographical proximity, instead of basing it on need. Now that may sound very strange and unfair. Why not base it on need? Because these will be places of abundance that will produce so much food, so much life, energy, so many resources for people to use. You will be able to meet all of the needs of most everybody within the area that needs to access those resources. But if somebody's saying, hey, I live a little bit further down the road and I need these resources too, how come you're not helping me? The answer is, you say, here's how I'm going to help you. Here's how we formed this. Here's how we formed this nonprofit. Here's how we identified a location and a building for it. Here's how we got people involved. We're going to help you do that. We're going to help you form a new organization, because if you outgrow what that facility can produce, that's it. That's the end of how big the community should be. That determines the size of your community. It's time to form another one, because we need to decentralize. That's decentralization. Decentralization is the key. That is how we are going to build this new world and save ourselves from this beast system. And it's a very simple concept. So our goal here on the Sovereign Village Project is changing. We're changing how we do things. We're not going to try to build a singular location anymore. What we're going to do is test these concepts. We're going to learn how to build these nonprofits. We're going to learn how to make these central locations that are places of abundance, that will solve our education, that will build the healthcare resources, that will solve the obesity for anybody that wants to, that will solve the many economic problems we have out here and the educational problems. We will address those and solve them ourselves, and then we'll package that in an easy form. We'll say, here's a resource, here's a template that you can take to your own community. So if you want to be a part of this, I've revamped the Sovereign Village Project website. So it's sovereignvillageproject.com/join, or you can just click the join tab and just reach out there and let me know you want to get involved. And there's different ways you could get involved by doing this where you're at, and we can help you identify good locations, identify parts of the country where this is the best place to do it, identify those buildings, how to get access to the buildings and these properties, how to build what we need to build, how to build sustainable buildings, how to design things around permaculture principles. We'll package and build templates to do all of that. But also, if you want to get involved right here in this part of Tennessee and you want to come and be a part of this community, it's a lot simpler now that I'm not trying to just get one big central property. Instead, I can send you property listings. I can let you know the areas that are ideal for homesteading, help you figure out the financial resources you need, help you navigate the government and the rules and the existing things that are blockages to doing this. And we'll form these communities out here. We'll form one here. We've got one going in the county next door. This is very doable, and we can make this happen. We can make this happen, and we can build a template that the whole world can then mimic, bound by simple principles of liberty, non-aggression, and prioritizing the dissemination of resources by geographical location, because these common areas, this road, the same concepts could be applied. Somebody's got to pay for that road, and if we truly believe that government is evil, which it is, then we need a different way of managing common lands, because common lands do need to exist. There's always going to be exploitation of the resources from common lands. If you look at what's happening in the Western U.S., the Bureau of Land Management and other government organizations, they exploit those resources in the trillions. They take the mining and the timber and the uranium, all those resources, and they just send it to their cronies, and they make trillions off of it. And that will always happen. That will happen in churches. It'll happen in nonprofits. Human greed and avarice will always exist, and we have to accept that. We have to accept the darkness within humanity so that we can then move forward and come up with real pragmatic solutions. And I think that when things are decentralized and managed locally by those with proximity, yes, there'll be some abuses, but also those abuses are isolated into little pockets, and we won't have this gigantic hierarchy that exploits those resources and keeps pushing the hierarchy taller and taller and makes the abuses and the control and the tyrannical way of doing things worse and worse. We can decentralize. We can fix it. We can fix our planet. We can fix our world. There is a new consciousness coming up, and that sounds really hippie and strange, but the new consciousness is just us realizing that we're our own hero. There's nobody coming to save us. Not right now. If you're a Christian, maybe you believe Jesus is coming to save us, but also remember that we are the body of Christ. So I take that literally. I take the Bible literally. So we are the hands. We have to be doing those things. We have to be feeding the hungry. we have to be helping our neighbors. We have to be protecting our neighbors. And that's the last piece of the puzzle. With these organizations, one of the things we can do is form methods of communication between neighbors and form community watches and form organizations that will protect ourselves and our families and our homesteads and our common areas from crime of everyone, whether that's small petty criminals, whether it's scrap metal thieves, or whether it's criminals who are using violence to take people's things, like government. We can solve the security problem, we can solve our food problems, we can solve our educational problems, we can do all this, and we're going to practice it right here. We're going to broadcast our failures and our successes, and we're going to make a template that the world can follow. So if this resonates with you, please join, send me a message, let's start communicating, let's start building this much, much better world. It's not utopia, it's nothing that revolutionary, it's nothing that new. It's just a rejection of coercion, it's a rejection of using violence against people. And it's a belief that we need to be the ones that fix our communities and that we need to solve the problems in our lives. All right, everybody. In the meantime, stay safe, be well, and happy homesteading.